Good morning from Germany, from Modellbau König. We have today a very special day because we are making a workshop here. Modellbau König is maybe the most important shop here in Germany, and they sell also throughout the world. But they make also many activities like what we are doing today. Fortunately, I can enjoy today with another 7-8 modelers that they are making the same than me at the same time. We are making the King Tiger from Dashberg. That is a new release, a recently new release. So I think that was a very good example to use the solution box from Enamel. And today we will stay doing this. We will see if we can finish or not. Probably not the details or the small parts, but we will be able to see most of the steps and to see how to fix the problems and many other aspects in the weathering process. So I hope you have fun. This video will be uploaded also to YouTube channel in Enamel, but also is online right now. So thank you to all of you if you are watching this video right now, and some people are ready to reply and to give you answer of what we are doing today, but it's very visual and you will be able to see everything. So all of you guys have the King Tiger ready with the base color with different camouflage. Now you can see some difference between some camouflage and other ones with more dark yellow. Other people use more gray, more green, and more red brown. So it's up to you. But anyway, I must tell you that always is better the dark colors when we are making weathering. The dark yellow is a really difficult color for the weathering, very difficult one. And this is because the dark yellow, the Dunkelgelb, is a similar color to the sand color and to the mud. So if someday we need to make a dark yellow tank, we will find more problems than usually. You guys who painted your Tiger one with darker colors, with more green and red brown, you will find more easy to make the weathering than the others that used more dark yellow. But this is a common problem with German tanks. In fact, there are many tanks that were painted only in dark yellow during the Second World War, and this is needed another different techniques to make something more special. For example, the modulation style works very well with the dark yellow and with another single color camouflage. But when we are using a camouflage like this one, almost all techniques will work very well. For everybody watching this video, this is the solution box and the video and the book. And theoretically, we made the first step, that is just to apply a red primer. Okay. Red primer can be any primer, can be black, can be gray, can be white, doesn't matter. The primer is extremely important when we are using acrylics, because the acrylics are different colors than lacquers. For example, Mr. Hobby is a very strong paint, and sometimes even you don't need a primer. But what is the problem of lacquer paints that are toxic and smell bad, and you will have a headache if you are painting for so long? I love those paints, even Gallanotes, but are extremely dangerous if you are working in your room. So this is why the acrylics become very popular around the world, and many countries are even forbidden the lacquer paints because of the toxicity. So in the future, in a very, very close future, probably you will be able to use only acrylics. Okay? So we must learn how to work with acrylics because they work in a different way than the enamels or lacquers. So the primer is always totally necessary. We already made the camouflage, all of you made the camouflage, and now I will explain you something about the varnish, satin varnish. The satin varnish I use it here just to unify the decals with the rest of the vehicle. But my recommendation always is better to mix the varnish with the paint. Always is much better. Will be more resistant and stronger. If you guys apply a very thick coat of satin varnish in all surface, maybe you can find some problems later with the washes or filters. Maybe not. Just to warn you and to let you know that could be a problem if you apply too much varnish. Also, I recommend you never to apply a varnish coat to the end of the process of the weathering of your vehicles. I mean, when you finish your tank and it's completely finished, don't apply a varnish coat to everything, or you will kill all different shade and texture in your model. For example, the difference between dry matte, fresh matte, satin parts of the metal, the tools. If you cover everything with a matte varnish, you will destroy the different texture for each different surface. So never apply a varnish coat, doesn't matter matte or satin, in the end. Don't do that. This is the first and more important advice. Well, I doesn't apply varnish in my model because I doesn't put decals, so I doesn't need it, and my surface is enough satin for all process. But very satin surfaces will be very good for washes and filters, for example. The washes, especially the washes, will work very well in the satin surfaces. And we will see how we will make more matte your model during the process of the weathering. So what is next? If we continue, the first thing that we will apply will be the filter. The filter is a very important step for different purposes. One, for unify the high contrast of the camouflage. So this is why it's so important. Second, because the filters provide a very high dip in the paint. I mean, when we paint the camouflage, something like that, so simple, the color looks very plain. It's just green and dark yellow and brown. But when we start applying the filters, many variations appear in the surface, making it more rich and deep. This is why the filters are so important. And the third important point is that you can modify the appearance of your model thanks to the filters. For example, imagine that you are making a Panzer III in Panther Gray color. And you know that the Panther Gray is always controversial because some people say, no, it's more blue, no, it's more black, no, it's more neutral, no? So imagine that you just paint your tank with any Panther Gray, and when you see your model in your hand, you think that it's too neutral, I mean, too much white and black. And you decide to apply a blue filter. The blue filter will help to modify the base color, changing in a very subtle way the aspect and giving a more bluish appearance to your model. The same with a Sherman. If you paint a Sherman and you think that it's too bright green and it's not too olive green, maybe you can apply some gray filters to reduce the intensity of the color. So play with the filters to modify the colors, play with the filters also to enrich the surface and to give more depth to the surface. This means that you can apply many filters, as much filters as you want, okay? Here we have, I think, only one, but it's more than enough to make a nice look to our model. It's something basic. but more than enough. So let me take the filter. Okay, here. In the market there you can find through ammo acrylic filters and enamel filters. The acrylic filters, in case that you are thinking about that in the future, is more optimized, for example, for people who make war games, fantasy, and they want faster methods of painting. So the acrylic one is more convenient for people who want more speed when they are painting. Also, people who make planes, they like the acrylic filters because they dry very fast and they apply the filters just in different panels. They don't apply the filters in every places, in all surface. They apply filters just in a punctual way, just here or here, and this is a good method and a good way to use the acrylic filters. Personally, because I like and I make a lot of tanks, I prefer the enamel filters. Why? Because I can work with the filter in a more fluid way, because I can remove it or concentrate more or blend it depending what I need in my model, and dry slowly, which is interesting sometimes. So shake it very well and let's start to paint. I will show you here in my model. Always I recommend you to have the odorless thinner next to you. So always the enamel odorless thinner next to you. I like to use any kind of support to avoid that this fall down. Working with enamel just in case that I need to clean something. The paper is here, like you can see. I put next to my model to remove the excess of liquid in my brush. Because the filter must humidify the surface, not overflow it, not to make too much wet. I will press over the paper, removing the excess. For example, this is overflowed, too much liquid, okay? Even you can see the drop, it's too much. And this is why we must remove just a bit, and then we can go inside your model. Don't pass the brush 2 times over the same place. I mean, don't do this. This is a big mistake. Don't do this all time over the same place. Just move the brush and don't touch it. Always removing the excess of paint in your brush before entering your model. So try to make in only one movement and don't repeat the same over the same place many times. Okay, this is the right way to apply a filter. Don't accumulate, don't concentrate, because this is a wash concept. So the filter must be over the surface in a uniform way, in a regular way. Especially over the Zimmerit areas. You must avoid that this accumulates so much. This is why we must remove the excess. One more time over the fenders in only one movement. Look that. Look that. The fender. Okay? That's all. One movement. If you have too much quantity of the product in your brush, you will accumulate. And we don't want to do that. So let me show you here one bath example. One bath example, okay?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Yes, this is brown because we are accumulating too much in the holes. Okay, this is brown. So we must try to remove it and expand in another direction very fast to avoid the accumulation, especially in the lighter areas. This cannot take too much time to you. Usually a filter in a 135 tank must take a few minutes, 5 minutes maybe. So if you are using more time for the filter, you are doing wrong, or you are passing the brush too much times over the same place. If you see that the color is accumulating around the details, just remove it with the brush. I am sorry to insist and to tell you 1,000,000 times, don't pass the brush many times over the same place. My recommendation is that when you are painting your model at home, for example, you arrive from work and you haven't too much time during the week for modeling, but you can go to your workbench, sit in front of your model, apply one filter and go to the bed. And the next day another filter. Because the enamel filter needs around 24 hours to dry completely. Of course here we haven't that time, but it's my recommendation when you are in your home, okay? To apply the right quantity. I will do again in the roof of the turret, so you have your second opportunity in your life to see how to apply correctly. Okay, this is the way. Can you see it? Very smooth and very thin. It's not necessary more layers. And no more accumulation, of course. And especially in one single color camouflage vehicles, I recommend you to apply different filters over different panel hatches, because you know the tanks, as you probably have seen in real life, are not made sculpted in a stone. It's not one piece of iron. They are composed of many different components and parts, different hatches, different materials. For example, the BMP1. The BMP1, the fenders, the side fenders in the BMP1, the central ones are made in aluminum, while the front and rear one are made in iron. And the frontal and the rear get rust very fast, and the middle ones, because are aluminum, never get rust. So this is something that not too many people know it. So how we can make the difference between the frontal and the central ones, for example, with filters. Different filters for the frontal and different filters for the center ones. Even in a Tiger, to make more variations, could be nice to make each fender with a different filter. Just in case for the future that you have more filters. For example, you can make this one with one color, and this one in a different one, and the last one in another different color. I do that very often in my models. In this vehicle that I made long time ago, all green color, but you cannot see two greens, the same green in the same vehicle. Each reactive block have a different tone of green, of green, because I apply gray filters, brown filters, green filters to create this nice contrast in all components. And obviously, because this model is not finished here in the cover, the dust and other effects will unify all of those contrasts. So don't be scared when you are making the filters and when you are applying contrast to your model, because everything will be unified at the end with the dust, which is very important. So sometimes the people get stressed because I need to paint my tank with different greens to make more variety, but it's not necessary. Just with the filters it's faster, because it's just with your brush. While if you need to do that with an airbrush, you need to mask, paint, another one, mask, so it's a very tedious work. So if you want to do something like that, filters is the faster method. Even if you combine acrylic filters, for example, you can paint each brick of those with acrylic filters very fast, and finally you can unify the whole tank with an enamel filter. But always first the acrylic and second the enamel, not opposite. Very important. Everything that we want to make with acrylic must be in the beginning and the enamel in the end. But don't interchange the process. That is very important. Okay, so my model is drying, and while it is drying, just for your information, the method of the step-by-step of this kind of books are took from Lego, because my son and me, we are fanatic of Lego, and I like it how are the instruction in Lego instruction in Lego kits. Very simple and almost one step in each page. So you like Lego too? Yes. So I thought that was the best way to explain to the modelers how to make this process, no? Very slowly with big photos and explaining with a lot of detail. So what we have next are the washes. The washes are totally different to the filters, of course, even if looks similar and smell similar, are not the same. The filter is a kind of transparent color, but the washes are used to create contrast in all the tiles of our tank. So always are darker colors, while the filters can be light colors. For example, can be pink, can be blue, can be any color. But the washes always darker than the base color of your vehicle to create that contrast, like we can see here in the details. Now still fresh or model, which is dangerous for the washes, because if everything is still fresh, we will have problems adding the washes. So I will use the hair dryer to accelerate the process a bit. I forgot to do one thing with my model while your kits are drying. That is just to mask half tank and left half tank without effects and the other half with effects. Not you can paint the whole tank, but I prefer to mask half tank so you will be able to see the high contrast between one side and the other in the end of the process. A pity that I missed the opportunity to mask the filters, because you could see the difference between the filter and no filter. But anyway, when you was painting the filter, when you was applying the filter, you saw the difference, right? Well, my model looks more ugly now, but it's just in a way to protect half and just to see what happened with all steps that we will do today. So let's go for the wash. Shake it very well. Nobody have hair dryer, right? I guess. No. And it's very important. Your model must be dry before apply the washes. It's very, very important. Anyway, remember, you must let dry during 24 hours each filter before start applying the washes. Don't forget it. So now we have no time, but don't forget that point. For the washes, I recommend you to take a finer brush. I cannot remember which brushes were included here. No, it's one flat and one very small. No? Again, the odorless thinner must be always next to you, just for cleaning. And now, there are many ways to apply the washes. Not all of them works in the same way depending the surface. For example, if our surface is too shiny or glossy, we can use some techniques for the washes. If our surface is a bit matte, we should use another ones. Anyway, why is so important a satin surface for the washes? Why? Because I explain it also in many places, in many paint demonstrations, but I always put the same example. What happens when the surface is totally matte? If you apply the wash over a matte surface, it's like when you put a piece of sugar in the coffee. What happens? That you touch the coffee with the sugar, and the sugar absorbs very fast the coffee, right? This is the action of the capillarity. The matte surfaces have that property. So if we apply the wash over a matte surface, the product, the liquid, will expand in all directions by capillarity. While if our model is satin, the wash will flow through the panels, lines and small details only. Can you see the difference? So some people don't take care about that, and they try to apply a wash and everything is dirty. Oh my God! And finally, their model looks very dark in general. And this is because the surface was very matte. Some of you have a very matte appearance. But one thing is the appearance and another thing is the structure in the surface. So I hope that maybe your model was very matte, no? But you apply the satin varnish anyway. So we will see what happened now. Anyway, someone has found any problem until now? Applying the filters? Everything was okay? Nobody had problems? So easy. Okay, fantastic. So shake the color and let's go. I recommend you to use any kind of palette like this or something similar, just to pour a bit of product here to avoid to work directly with the bottle, no? But this is up to you. I like to control it more here. So here we have the wash, we have our model, and in difference with the previous step, we will put the wash only in the details. For example, around the wheel seams, like this, trying to control it well around the hooks, the clamps. In general, all the tiles. It's not a problem if I make there something that must be clean, no? Because later we will clean it. So you don't need to be too much accurate. So around the periscope, more details. Just put the color and forget it. Don't touch it. One important thing is that you can repeat this process as much times as you want. For example, even after the pigments process, you see that you need again more contrast, you can repeat the wash step. So the modeling is not something that you do one time and following the steps. and everything must work. No, no, you can go back and repeat again until you achieve the look that you want. For example, here you can see that I am not too much precise, I am not too much accurate applying the washes, but I don't take care. One common mistake with modelers is that they make a wash covering all surface like a filter, and this is obviously a mistake. And what happened with the Zimmerit? Eh?
Yes.
With question. We must apply a wash over the filter, over the Zimmerit or not? What do you think, guys?
Not really.
Not. No, because if we apply the washes over the tiles of the Zimmerit, we will create too much contrast and will be too much exaggerated and unrealistic. In fact, you guys, some of you were showing me photos, like reference, right? That you have in your cell phone. Ah, look, I am doing this vehicle, no? And you show me a real photo. If you observe real photos, you will know that the Zimmerit haven't dirt between the tiles, having contrast. Why? Because nothing happened around those details. It's not the same, the rivets or panels in the engine hatch, because it's full of grease and it's always opening and closing, and we are representing the contrast or the darkness of the lines of the panels. But the Zimmerit is something like a stone that is with no... It's not a place where the dirt is accumulating, especially when some pattern of Zimmerit was inclinated. So the accumulation is impossible in vertical areas and in that direction sometimes. We see the relief of the Zimmerit thanks to the light, because the sun is over the tank and we can see a relief, but it's not because the accumulation of dirt. So this is why we cannot apply the washes over the Zimmerit. For example, here, let me show you one example. I must apply here in the metal parts, here, okay? And maybe I can apply in the well seam only here, also around the details of the cable tom only. Can you see my example, right?
Yeah.
Only here, but not in the Zimmerit. This is one of the most common mistakes in most of the modelers, and you see in the model contest very often. Doesn't matter if when we apply the wash around the details of the cable tom, if the wash expand a bit around the Zimmerit, nothing happened. It's not a big deal, no? But don't apply washes over the Zimmerit. Here I will make a wrong example. Let me show you. This is totally wrong, okay? Don't do that, never. Never do this, never. Okay, look. We will destroy completely our model, the camouflage will disappear, everything will be too dark and will be impossible to remove later. I make here the brown example in the rear, and now I am cleaning and removing because it will be so ugly if I do that. Yes, well, I have my wheels here, but obviously you must apply the washes around each rivet of the wheels, around each rivet. If there are too much rivets, maybe you can apply a general wash to avoid to spend too much time, especially with the Tiger Late wheels that have so many rivets. Just for save time, apply a general wash and that's all, okay? Just for save time. I am not painting the wheels for save time, in fact. Obviously, with the early Tiger 1 wheels is different, because those have less rivets, and I recommend you to apply dot washes, pin washes around each rivet. But with the late ones, no problem. Do just the hull, all components, the headlight. You can apply a wash in the union between the frontal armor plate and the hull armor plate, for example. So before we move to the turret, I will explain you how to blend the washes in different ways. For that, we need a sponge. This is a method. I will explain you several methods. And this is one, using this kind of a sponge, for example. I usually use the flat one, but it's in my box, so I don't want to stop just for searching that sponge. But any sponge can be useful, especially the flat ones, to remove the excess of the washes. Just let me show you. You don't need to do in your model, but just let me show you. For example, let me see if it is work, because if the wash dry too much or the surface is too matte, will be difficult to remove with the sponge. People who have a very satin surface will be able to use the sponge more easily. Don't forget it. So this is what happens when some people see something in internet, in YouTube or in a book, and they try in their models and they say, in my model doesn't work that technique. And this is because depending how is your surface, the same technique will work or not. The best example is in this table. We are here 8 persons, each one have a different surface in their models. Which sponge you took? The triangular one?
Yes.
This is to. This is to. Let me check. Yes. This is good. This is good. Yeah. Yes. This is the perfect one. Only in this table there are 8 different examples using the same products, the same paints, the same varnish, and each one is completely different. So we will obtain also different results. So with the sponge, here when it is already dry, like you can see, that is more or less dry, right? It's not fresh. We can use the sponge to remove it. In my case, because I don't apply satin varnish, I even cannot remove it, and also I let dry too much. So probably most of you with the satin surface will be able to remove it easily, but not in my case, because my model was too matte, because I doesn't apply the satin varnish. So I cannot remove with the sponge. But this is a common method to remove the wash. Sometimes you can humidify the top of the sponge with thinner, just a bit, and then theoretically this will work. Now works. Okay, you can see how I remove the excess of wash with the sponge. But I don't recommend you that, because you will remove too much. So how we can blend the washes? The classic method is using the brush and clean thinner. Odorless thinner, my brush, I clean it, and I remove the excess of liquid. Can you see, no? That I almost haven't liquid of enamel odorless thinner in my brush. When the brush is in that way, I can start blending the wash, for example, here. Just observe. Don't let dry too much time. This is why I told you don't go to the turret, or you will find the washes too dry and will be difficult to remove it. This is why I don't want to allow you to go to the turret. Even I recommend you to apply the washes only in some areas, blend it and move to another area. Because if it dry too much, you will have big problems. Especially with very matte surfaces, remember. Always drying the brush in a paper and blending. So everybody go to blend with a sponge if your surface is very satin, or with the brush if you cannot remove with a sponge. For people painting planes, this doesn't happen because the airplane modelers always apply a very glossy varnish in the surface. So to do that in a plane is so easy, more than in a tank. You can follow also the techniques from airplane modelers, but you will need to change later some concepts. Remember to work with few quantity of thinner in your brush, very important. If you see that some areas become too dry, just humidify, let do the effect during few minutes and come back and blend it. If you remove too much, also you can apply again the wash and repeat the process. Now I am moving to the turret, around the periscope of the cupola. The hatch, the handles, the machine gun support, the cupola ring. But maybe the most important lesson about the wash over a Zimmerit tank is that we don't must apply the wash over the Zimmerit. In this step, guys who painted their tank with more dark yellow, they will see more contrast than, for example, me, that I painted too much brown and green. But anyway, apply the washes also over the dark areas of the red, brown or green. Those techniques are accumulative. I mean, even if you don't see too much the technique that you are applying in each moment, like for example filters, they are accumulating and accumulating, and in the end you will see your model with a lot of effects. Again with the turret, try to paint only half turret, blend it and go for the other half. Don't try to do everything at once. If I am going too fast or I am giving you too much information, please let me know, and I will go more slowly. The next step is the chipping, that in my opinion is always the funniest and more interesting part in the weathering process. The chipping can give to your model a lot of life, or can ruin and destroy completely your model, the chipping. So it's extremely important what we are doing with the chipping. Especially with the German tanks, that there are also a lot of controversy and a lot of opinions about if they get chipping or not, etc., etc. Well, the best example that I can give is the actual Ukrainian war in Ukraine. Those are modern vehicles. We can see modern vehicles, and now we can see 1 million of photos in color of those vehicles. And Ukraine is one of the scenarios in the Second World War, like was Belarus or Russia or Germany. So it's the same condition, same atmosphere, same temperature, same of everything. And even with more technology and more new paints and vehicles, the tanks get rust, the tank get a lot of chipping, a lot of chipping. So I recommend you to visit internet and see some photos, and you will see how the tanks and any vehicle is full of chipping, in fact. So if this happened today, even in Iraq, in Afghanistan, some people always say, no, because the modern vehicles never get chipping or never get rust. And there are 1 million photos of N1 Abrams in Afghanistan or in Iraq that appear full of rust and full of chipping. So I remember also Ralph Willing, probably many of you know it because he's here from Germany. He worked taking photos for the Bundeswehr, and he make 1 million books also. He was sharing with me a long time ago a few photos of the N1 Abrams from one of his friends fighting in Afghanistan. Those photos show a lot of chipping and scratches in the fenders of the N1 Abrams, but also in the turret, in the horizontal plates of the turret, around the hatches. In every places, you was able to find a lot of chipping in a modern N1 Abrams in Afghanistan. So nobody can say the modern tanks doesn't get rust and doesn't get chipping, because this is not true. These appear in the modern tanks. Of course, probably not in a Leopard 2 in a depot just making maneuvers, because they are trying to conserve it and to keep in good condition. It's normal. But I am not talking about tanks in maneuvers. I am talking about tanks fighting. And when you see the photos of the T-72B3 fighting in Ukraine, the crew of the tank have not enough time to take care of the tank. Even they have not time to clean it or to do something of to put fuel and ammunition and let's go to fight again. So we see those tanks full of effects of dirt, earth, stones, bricks, branches from trees. And if this is happening right now in 2022, the same happened in 1943, 1944 or 1945 over the Tiger tanks, Panthers and any other vehicles. So, okay, we haven't real or color photos of Tigers, Panthers and Panzer IV, but we can take inspiration from the modern and actual tanks in Ukraine or Afghanistan or in any other part of the world and apply the same effects to our models. Okay? And the chipping is something that appears in all tanks in combat situation. So, this is why the chipping can give us a lot of information about if that tank was fighting during 1 day or during 1 month, if it's a veteran or if it's a new from the factory. So if you don't make chipping, in your tank, this means that it's very new, right? But if the tank is very new, you cannot make fading or discoloration in your tank. And this is why we see in a model contest a beautiful tank with discoloration effects, with fading, but not chipping. And they say, no, because this tank is very new. It's just 2 days fighting in the battlefield. And I say, okay, then why this tank have discoloration and fading because the sun? Because the discoloration needs many weeks or even months to affect the surface of the vehicle. So this is like a scenario of a crime, no? You must discover all evidence to see what happened with that vehicle, if this is a veteran or not. For example, it's not compatible a very veteran tank. Imagine this Tiger 1, full of chipping, full of discoloration, fading, effects, hair, and with all fenders completely new. Because the fenders is the first thing that become destroyed in a Tiger 1. Very fast. Why? Because it's very fragile, it's a very thin metal, and when the tank is moving between the trees in a forest, for example, those are very damaged and very fast due to the trees and vegetation. So everything must be logic when you are making your model. Everything must be logic. We cannot make new fenders with a lot of chipping, because me, like a judge in a contest, I will see that big mistake. So the mistake is not only about the painting, it's also about the logic of everything together. Okay, in that case, my fenders are totally new because it's a kit out of box. It's just for learning. It's just to understand the techniques, and it's not necessary to damage the fenders. But if you want to make a very veteran tank, please replace the fender with photo etch, for example. It's something simple and will give to your tank a lot of life. Or, for example, removing the frontal fender to make more attractive, no? And just to see the tracks. So we can do many things. Or some tools are missing, for example. That is also typical, or the rear armor of the exhaust pipes that also can be damaged. So keep on mind for your model. Now, if you are finishing with the washes that you sold, it's not necessary that you do everything in all areas of your tank. You can be more selective, or even do like me, just make half of your tank and will be faster for you. But now let's go for the base colors. Better like this. We use it like a base color, the Dunkelgelb, the Choco Brown, and the olive green. Well, now I must explain a bit of theory and controversy also about the colors and the way of application. Most of the German tanks in the Second World War were painted in the factory in the beginning in Panther Gray, right? And in the middle of the war they were painted in dark yellow, directly from the factory. They painted the whole model in dark yellow. And in the end of the war, many German tanks were painted just in red primer, and they painted the camouflage color directly over the red primer, not over the dark yellow. So depending where is localized or kit or model or idea, if it's in the beginning of the war, in the middle, or in the end, we must think about how to make the chipping. If my tank is in the middle of the war, so this means that it was painted in dark yellow in the factory, and in the battlefield the crew painted the green and brown, then I can make chipping over the green and brown with dark yellow, to see that dark yellow through the green and brown. But if my tank was made, for example, a King Tiger from 1945, it probably was painted in red primer in the factory. And what made the crew? Just painted the Dunkelgelb and the green over the red primer. They don't repaint it in dark yellow the whole tank and then the camouflage. Why? Because they spend too much paint and too much time. So This is why in my video on YouTube I explain how to paint here this camo, no? It's another method, just painting each color in that area, not covering the whole surface with the camouflage, no? Because it's a waste of material, it's a waste of paint. So you must study very well where is localized your tank to see how must be the chipping. In this case, because I want to make something funny and simple and visual, I will start painting the chipping first in Dunkelgelb over the camouflage part, and later I will paint the chipping color, the dark brown chipping color over the Dunkelgelb. Even if it's difficult to understand right now because it's a bit complex, the matter of the colors, the people who really love the story and the colors theory of the German tanks will find this opinion interesting, no? But now the point is that we must just learn how to make the chipping, which is always interesting, for some people very difficult. And one more time I must explain something before start the chipping, so I will let you time for drying. I will draw here a bit of theory about chipping, which is always interesting. The first thing that we must understand about chipping, I always make this draft, this scheme in many paint demonstration, but I will do one more time here for all of you guys, is that I don't know if the people from the internet can see here. I hope so. Yes? Fantastic. Many people, when they make a tank, imagine that this is my tank. My beautiful tiger. Okay. This is my tiger, right? So, they start painting the chipping, and they start, for example, let me do this. They start making nice chipping here, and they see that they make a nice chipping. I am good making chipping. I am very good making chipping. So they start making chipping, and more chipping, because they forget that they are making a tank with volume, and they start making chipping around all areas in a very homogeneous way, and they continue making chipping because they forgot that they are painting a tank. They are so excited painting each chipping that they forget that they are painting a tank. I am very good making chipping. I am the best one in the world painting chipping. And finally, when they finish, they do something like that. Terrible, ugly, because this is very homogeneous and symmetric, and everything have the same quantity of chipping, the same intensity, and this is the worst of the worst that we can do in a model when we do something like that. So how is the solution? The problem is that our brain is the thing that we have inside our head. Some people, not everybody have. But our brain is always organizing everything. Like in your normal life, what you do in your normal life, you arrive to home and you organize your clothes, your things, everything is perfect, alienated, mathematic, everything perfect, right? In Germany more than in Spain, in fact. But this is because our brain is working always in that way. Our brain is always calculating, organizing, and try to make everything parallel, except in Spain also, always perfect. And when we are making our models, we forget that the nature is random, is aleatory, is irregular, and we forget that this doesn't happen in a real tank. Because sometimes a stone hit the tank in one side, for example here, example here, and here appear a big scratch or a big chipping, but not in the other side. And maybe here appears something like this, but not in the other side. Or here maybe around the turret or the hatch or the cupola, but not in the other side. The same here in the engine hatch, but not in the other side. Maybe here and not in the other side. Always asymmetric. Okay? Super important. This is the way. You must be asymmetric when you are making the chipping in your models. Okay? Asymmetric. If today I catch you doing something symmetric in your model, I don't know what I will do, but I will be very upset with you. Or maybe without lunch. Okay? Don't forget it, guys. I am telling you so seriously. Don't do symmetric things. So if you do something in one hatch, don't do in the other exactly the same. Must be different or nothing. And try to find different places for the chipping. But not only from one side to the other, also from the back to the front. Also, the intensity of the chipping and everything must be different in the rear area to the front. If we are able to keep that in mind forever, we will have the first step to become a good modeler. Because this is one of the first things that we must learn when we are making models, that we must be random, aleatory and asymmetric in everything that we made. Not only in the chipping is the first example and the most important, but we must do also when we made the oil effects, the dust, the splashes, the matte splashes, and absolutely everything. And not only with the weathering, also with the tools, with the components, with the accessories, with the stopwatch, helmets, the machine guns, the ammunition, everything that we place or we put in a model must be asymmetric. Okay? Don't forget that, please. So, the first thing that we must understand about chipping is the symmetry. Shape. Many people okay. Many people, when they made the chipping, they start painting and they do something like this, like amoebas or clouds in the sky, okay, with rounded shapes. But what we must do, shape, is irregular shapes, like when you see in Google Map and you see the islands and you want to discover a secret base or something, or a nudist beach or something like that, no? I don't know. But you are looking in Google Maps and you see that the islands are something like this, especially if you see Norway, no? That is chaotic, or Greece, right? So the shape is always fragmented and very raw, like this one. This is more closer to the real chipping than this. And most of the modelers do that because they use too much paint, or I will explain you later, when you are painting chipping with acrylic over acrylic base, this phenomenon is what happened. Because it's acrylic over acrylic, so it expands in a uniform way and the shape becomes more rounded, like clothes. But when you paint with acrylic over enamel surfaces, And hey, guys, now my surface is enamel because I apply filters and washes, right? So now it's a good surface to paint the chipping, and we will obtain more similar shape to this one. One more time, try to observe Google Map next time, and you will see the islands and everything that is very like this. It's like very intricate and sharp. And this is more rounded. The size. Okay? Some people do that. They make a nice distribution in the tank, asymmetric, very nice, everything perfect. They make a beautiful shape like a Greece or Mallorca or those islands, like this. Very nice. But they continue making chipping and they make a giraffe pattern. All of them with the same size and the same distribution between them. This is also a very common mistake of people making chipping, that they learn how to do it, they learn that must be asymmetric, but all chipping looks the same size. And this is a big mistake, because must be like this. Start making a big one, for example, together with another small ones, maybe small dots, scratches, trying to make it very irregular between them. Not only the shape, not only the distribution, but also the size of them must be very different from one to the others. Combining small points or scratches together with big ones. If you remember those 3 tips for the chipping, you always will be very successful making the chipping, and you will become addicted to the chipping because it's so fun to make chipping. So how to do it? Because the theory is very nice. And now let's go to our model. Okay. So remember that we took the 3 base colors. We will start using the base color, this one. And I need the palette. Yes, always check it very well, the acrylics. Okay, remember that our bottles from Ammo always have a steering wheel that is totally necessary for shake it. Just pour here a bit of color in the palette. So imagine, now try to imagine, just imagine that our tank was painted in dark yellow in the factory. Okay? That probably that was painted already in red primer, no? But just imagine, just to make it more interesting. It's true that I always recommend, just for your information, the yellow brushes from Ammo are very cheap brushes that I use very often. It's what I use more. Why? Because it's enough quality to paint my models many times for a very low price, very cheap. So you see that almost all my brushes are the yellow one. But we have another range of brushes, and this is what I recommend you in the future. For example, the red ones are Marta Kolinsky, very expensive ones, but I always like to have 1 or 2 for chipping or for figures or for something similar. The red ones are used for figure painters mostly, but I like to have 1 or 2 for chipping because they work very well, so that is my recommendation. We have another ones like the gray ones, the silver ones, that are used only for dry brush. This kind of hair is very good for dry brushing. The white ones are for decals. For people who, especially for people who make rally cars or planes, they need to put a lot of decals. Those brushes are amazing to place the decals and to work with them. Of course, we have the rubber brushes, that is to apply, for example, metal pigment and other purposes. And finally, those blue ones are optimized for pigments, to apply the pigments directly with the brush. So just for your information, just to see the difference between the brushes. Of course, the yellow ones is the more recommendable because it's the cheaper option and you can use the brush for a long time, even if the quality is not the best of the best, but you spend less time for the basic techniques. Anyway, let's try this brush because it's new for the chipping. So now we need water. Let me explain you how to start making the chipping in the Tiger, because each vehicle is different and each vehicle have different places to paint the chipping, and also we must look for the aesthetic of the vehicle. So we can paint dark yellow chipping only over the green or brown areas, right? Because my tank supposed to be painted in dark yellow in the factory, and the crew of the tank painted the green and brown after the dark yellow. This is just a theory, just for this example, one more time. So the first, just look to the screen, okay? And later you will do in your model. Always I put a bit of water in my brush, like you can see here a drop, okay? I remove that drop and I touch the color because directly from the jar maybe it's too thick. So I diluted just a little. And now I can start painting in my model. Where? For example, I always start in easy areas. For example, I like to start always in the tigers from here. Always in the edges, like I am doing right now. You can appreciate in the TV or you can see? Okay? And then I start making it bigger. Trying to be irregular like I told you. Okay, something like that. Also, I can paint, for example, just here a bit. If I see that the mixture is getting too thick, I put another drop of water. I clean it in the paper and I go again inside. For example, here in the edge. Maybe I can make some longitudinal chipping, because here is the root wooden parts to clean the gun. I am creating this thanks to small dots. Okay, for example, this. Let's go to the frontal fender. I want to exaggerate here a bit just to show you. I will exaggerate. Because I can show you one example of big chipping, how I started working the chipping. First, I make a shape with not too much control, something like this. And remember that also all of this will be unified by the dust and other effects. Remember that I told you about the shape, to make big ones, about the sizes, to make big one together with small dots, like islands. Here are some of them. Don't repeat the same chipping here. Here I make a lot, so I don't repeat in this size. Okay, and here maybe I can make chipping here. Also, I don't repeat here in this corner. To avoid a symmetry with this other side. So here I don't make it, I make here. Maybe around this kind of locket or the tile. And always making small dots. Later we will add the chipping color over the dark yellow in some areas. Okay, but this is the way. Maybe here also. Of course, this is not my best position for make the chipping because I need to show you in the screen. So I have not a good angle to paint it more accurate. Because I need to force my position for the camera. But just I am trying to give you one idea, no, how to work with the chipping. One second. The chipping process is always very slowly. Probably is the more slowly step or process in the weathering, and need a lot of time in the chipping, like you can see. When you have practice, you can go faster, no? But it needs a lot of time. I don't expect that you made the chipping in all tank, but you can make one more time chipping only in half of your tank or only in some areas. For example, here in the, if you see the screen, you will see how I will make some longitudinal scratches. Like small lines, but always combined with small dots and little scratches. Especially in the first fender. Remember to add a little drop of water in the mixture of your paint to help to flow better the paint. Look one more time to the screen to show you how to create contrast between one panel and the other. Yeah? For example, here, even if the green color is in both sides, I will make just chipping in one side, like this. Yeah? And one more time, I show you the scratches that I made, very thin ones, extremely thin. This is why you must control the quantity of paint in your brush, or even make some test in another plastic part to be sure that you have the right quantity of paint. This is probably the most difficult point. Know your brush, know the quantity of color that you have in the height of your brush. This is important when we are making chipping. And remember what I told you about to be random and irregular. Don't repeat the same chipping in every places. I will catch you later, remember. I told you that the main problem when you make the chipping is that you forget that you are painting a tank and you only are focused in the chipping itself, trying to make nice shapes or dots, but you forget that you are painting a big tank. Another advice, I don't know if some of you make 1/16 scale tanks, but to paint chipping in big tanks is more easy than in small ones. Now I will make also around the hatches. So make a new mixture with the green and the base color, the dark yellow, something like that. To paint a kind of highlights. So now, if you are able to control your brush, you can paint with the small dots. I don't know if you are able to see it. So you can stay doing that in the well scene just to make a kind of contrast or highlight. The same with the brown. Mix the brown with the dark yellow and you will be able to make the highlights. So you will give a kind of volume. This takes a lot of time, but if you do well, looks fantastic. And you can do also, but do the same, but with a dark color to make the shadows of the well. In fact, if you want to do that, it's better start with the shadows and second the highlights. Like I told you, Daniel, this is very convenient, for example, when you are making a winter camouflage or a Africa Corps tank. And you can use also the same color to make some highlights, for example, in some details. For example, this or this. Or even this part. But this is up to you. If you want to make it more complicated with more detail and more effects, you can do it. I do it. I do that very often, but I don't want to give you too much task to do now. You must try to make the chipping only in the areas that are visible. This is for later, but the Zimmerit was probably many of you know the composition of the Zimmerit, that was a kind of mixture of wooden components mixed with a ochre pigment, that was in fact very yellow in the beginning. When the Zimmerit was applied in the factory, the Zimmerit color was very yellow because one of the components was ochre pigment. But with the time, the ochre pigment become very light, become faded when it is completely dry, and the tank become chipped because the explosions or any other things. The Zimmerit appear in a very light color, that is a kind of sand color. So this is why I don't want that you use the same color than the dark yellow. But theoretically, the Zimmerit was a kind of ochre, similar to the dark yellow. But only in the beginning. Also, the point is that after 70 years, the Zimmerit that appear in the museums looks very light because the pass of the time. This is why the Zimmerit was too flammable and was a very bad idea at the end. No, but for example, the Americans in the Pacific Theater, they were scared with a kind of magnetic mines from Japanese.
Yeah, I've seen on bamboos.
And this is why they added those kind of
Spikes.
Yes, yeah, in the roof of the Shermans and other vehicles. As you can see, when you find a way to make the chipping, it becomes something very satisfactory and pleasing. This is why this step is one of my favorite ones when I am making models. Because it is really relaxing. And another thing, paint the ring of the cupola with this color. The upper area of the ring. I mean the ring for the machine gun, for the MG. And now, guys, I will request your attention to explain you something very useful. Making chipping with a sponge. I like to collect different kind of sponge with different intensities and different size, like you can see here. This is softer, this is harder, so I collect all of them and I use it depending what I need, no? In that case, I will use this one that is a bit hard. I will take a portion of this. I think that Christian loves this technique a lot. You like it, right? You use a lot. So I am removing a small portion of the sponge, like you can see. Okay? And I try to make it rounded. Okay? So, some areas in the tanks always appear with a kind of microchipping around, especially around hatches, around some panels. So I take the sponge, I touch the chipping color with it, and now I will remove the excess in a paper. Something like this, and now I can go inside, for example, around this hatch to create a micro chipping. Don't overdo it, be careful. Only in some areas, like this, okay? Maybe in some fender I can do it too.
Kontrollieren könnt ihr das auch, wenn ihr das mit der Pinzette macht. Dann kommt der kleine weg.
And if, for example, we want to make chipping in some flat areas, what I use is tape. And for example, I can place, let me find, maybe the rear hatch. So with the tape you can protect many areas in your model. This is due to the friction and because maybe the tankers touch it too much, and this appear very often in the tanks. Now I remove it, so I will obtain that area with a lot of chipping. Another area that I like a lot for this method is the gun barrel. In some part of the gun barrel where the creep of the tank are touching very often. Oh, it's out of focus. Now it's clear, no? Now it's sharp. Of course, around the loader hatch, it's possible to do that. In some plates, depending the tank, of course, depending the hatches, depending of many factors, you can apply this kind of chipping or not. For example, here in the roof a bit. You will obtain different results depending the sponge, the hardness of the sponge too, and the quantity of paint on it. And after you apply the sponge, you always need to retouch with the brush in some areas, because if you leave just the sponge, sometimes looks a bit strange. So try to combine the sponge with the chipping by hand, by brush. Probably many of you that are watching this now, also the people in internet, you will know that the surface, even sometimes look matte, is in fact is a bit satin. And this is good for the washes, this is good for the techniques that we are doing right now. Let me explain you how to make the chipping. So here I have the tank from Timo, and I will make an example here just to show you how to make, especially when you have a tank that is overpainted in dark yellow and almost with no camouflage. Thank you. So we need the white color and the beige color, that was this one. First, we paint the chipping color. This works much better in vertical surfaces. I don't know if I can do... What if I do here? Okay. Just imagine that this is a vertical surface, for example, a semi-hull track or something like that. So, and also I will make bigger here, because I have not limitations. So, first I will paint the chipping. Remember about to make small dots like islands. Okay. Something like this. Imagine that this is my tank. So now take the two colors. Now I mix the white with a bit of dark yellow. And what I will do is a kind of line under the chipping. To create volume.
Like the women. For the
yes. Or like some of us in the Saturday night, no? Yes, no, it's true. It's, this is a technique used in illustration, in fact. It's used in illustration mostly. But of course the women use for makeup to make highlights and shadows. When I dress like a drag queen during the Saturday night, I use that also. That is another hobby. Okay. Of course, I am doing it more exaggerated, just to show you where to do the highlights. Even each dot, so you can appreciate the volume, no? That is very cool, especially when you have the whole vehicle painted in dark yellow. This is a good alternative. Remember that the other method is first paint the chipping in light color, also for people painting a tank in dark yellow. That also is applicable to any, for example, a Sherman in green color, or even a counter camouflage for British vehicles. So we must try to paint it a bit more exaggerated than usual. And now we paint the dark one, but painting inside the scratches, inside. This is two different methods used by the modelers very often. Some modelers do this. In my opinion, is more easy and maybe even more realistic, this method. Just making a line under the chipping. But this is also nice. When you see a model painted with this, looks very attractive. So this is my recommendation for plain colors. In that case, because we have a very contrasted camouflage, maybe it's not recommendable to do this, because if we do the highlights in all chipping over the brown, over the green, will be too much, no? So sometimes less is more, okay? But here is the example of something cool, and depending where you are doing this, especially if you don't overdo it, because maybe you can do some areas like this, and another area is only painting directly with the brush, making chipping very thin scratches, and this is more than enough. So not always is necessary to do that. Try to combine where to use this and when to use that. For example, if you want to focus the attention in one specific area because you want to place some soldiers, do that, and all the attention of the spectator will go to that point, because have much more detail than this one. It's like when you see a photo of a movie. Maybe you notice that when you see a movie, sometimes you see the face of the actor, but the background is unfocused. And they do that only just to force to the spectator to look only to that specific point. So you can do the same with your models. You can be more detailed in one specific area, like this, and the other areas in your tank can have only simple chipping to avoid to catch too much the attention. So in the case of the tiger, imagine that here you want to put two soldiers, one stand next to the cupola and the other inside the cupola. Okay, try to concentrate more chipping around the figures and less in another areas of the vehicle, because if you fill everything with chipping, first you are broken the rules that I told you since the beginning about the asymmetry and random, and second, you are distracting the spectator in too many directions, while you want that the spectator just look to your figures, because you are explaining a story that they are pointing in that position and they are doing something, no? So this is a good way to communicate through your models with the spectator, okay? Thank you, Timo.
Thank you very much.
Well, and let me explain also the sponge. Timo, 1 second, sorry, give me one more time. So I will explain here the 3 types of chipping, and the other was the sponge. Because sometimes over the tank is difficult to see it, and it's better to explain over one big example like this one. I use this technique a lot depending the size, for example, in the Sherman, in the roof of the Sherman, which is very common to see this kind of fading or chipping. For example, try to imagine that this is a hatch, okay? Yeah, this is a hatch, so we do that only in one side. If you can remove the hatch and do that like I made here in my driver hatch, it's okay, it's much better. If you cannot remove the hatch, just mask the hatch and then do the chipping. So here you have the 3 samples. Obviously, at this point also some areas can be painted with the metallic gunmetal chipping color, no? If we need that some part become more damaged or more recently damaged. But it's better to avoid it. If you don't know how to control it very well, it's better to avoid the chipping with the metal colors. We are at this point, number 7. We made the chipping with the dark yellow, and finally we painted also the dark brown chipping color over the dark yellow, or directly the chipping color over the dark yellow areas. Observe here how thin is the chipping and the scratches. Well, here are more examples of chipping. It's almost the same that we made right now. And now, even if we have here the step number 8 regarding the streaking, let's back again to the wash color that we were using before. And even if this is not the most appropriate color for make the streaking, we will use it to make a kind of a streaking in the fenders, in the side fenders, using the flat brass. So now you can see that the solution box contains almost all necessary to paint a specific subject, no? Of course, always we need, for example, a white color or something extra, no? But most of the cases you have everything inside. So take again the wash color, especially from the bottom of the bottle, and let's draft some lines, vertical lines and regular ones in the size of your model. Again, this is not the most appropriate color. We have a specific color for streaking, but we can learn how to do it. So we can drive very fast the lines. Doesn't necessarily that are too perfect, because we will blend it with the flat brass and thinner. Okay, now we take the flat brass with odorless thinner. We remove the excess in the tissue paper by pressing against the tissue paper, and now we will start blending from up to down with very fast movements. Don't let dry too much or will be difficult to remove it, because this is a wash. So this is why I recommend you to use streaking products. Paint just one panel very fast and blend it when it's still fresh. Yes, the dark yellow was. Again, it's not the right color, but just to explain you how to make a little streaking effects in the fenders. Something simple. Or even over the Zimmerit, but we will have the risk to make it too dark. So better to avoid. Maybe the Rommel Kisten. If you do that in fresh, will be faster and easier. Look here. Paint the lines. And very quick, blend it. Okay, this is just another thing that you can do with the same color. But better don't do it over the Zimmerit, because maybe this becomes too dark. If you have another streaking color, lighter color, maybe you can do over the Zimmerit. But very fast and blending very well. You have the grind?
Yeah, right.
Well, I make a mistake. You must do it with this one. Yeah. No, with the, because I cannot remember that was included the grind color, sorry. But you can do those effects with the grind color, okay? With this one.
Because we believe you everything, and when you say we have to use this one, we use this one.
Yeah, no, because I was not able to remember, and now I found it. Okay, I will do one more time with this. Just shake it a bit, shake it. One important tip about the brush in this kind of paints. If you find that the brush is a bit dry, just clean it with odorless thinner or cleaner and treat it like any other brush, and then will become soft again, because now mine looks a bit hard, and it's because it become dry inside the bottle, but I can clean it. Anyway, yes, it's a bit dry, so I will clean it over a paper, and now will be soft. With this method it's much easier and faster because I already have the brush, so just I will paint vertical lines and I will blend it with a flat brush. Try to leave some remains of the lines, don't remove it everything. You must leave something or you will lose all effect. I will repeat here in some fenders. I recommend you to make some lines longer than others. Try to make all of them with the same size and same intensity. And first you can blend it one time, clean the brush, and repeat the same, removing more quantity of color. Okay, so I am making a kind of contrast between one fender and the other, this with and this without. Who had the model without the fenders? Was you?
Yeah.
How is your name?
Daniel.
Daniel too?
Yeah.
We have two Daniels, good. Daniel Chu, can you give me your model?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Daniel Chu. The turret, remove the turret. Well, what we can do if our model haven't fenders, that we always like to see the contrast. So one way is to use masking tape. And here we can work in two different ways. I will make both in your model. And each one will be different to the other side. But because we are looking for asymmetry, it's okay, no?
Yeah.
For the people here with my own cameras and for you guys with different cameras. Right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras and maybe any other hide camera in another place. So 6 cameras. Someone was laughing over there, so maybe it's true. Okay, let's make the grind effects here in one side under and in the other side in the upper area. So we will mask. All of this is extra, doesn't appear in the book. As you can see here, I will make the deer effects in the upper area and in the other side in the under area, in the lower area. Because with the dust, we will make also the opposite in both sides. So are two different ways to do it in case that you prefer one or the other, depending the circumstance and depending the surrounding in your model. If it's more dusty or more rainy. But the method is exactly the same and so fast. So we can paint with the grind color. Don't let the color entry too much in the Zimmerit, because then it can entry under the tape to the other side, and we don't want this. And now with the flat brush, again with thinner cleaning and blending very fast. Okay. Now we will remove it, and if anything of the color has moved under the mask, it's time to clean it. But now you understand why it's better to put this one in the end. Okay, the look is good. Maybe we can remove a bit of excess with the brush. And we will let dry. And in the other side, we will make just the opposite. We will paint here. In less quantity, of course. And now we will blend it. This will represent the accumulation of the dirt over the missing fenders. And again, we will remove it very fast. Well, was more or less good. Now we must let dry and will become more matte. Make softer, trying to remove the accumulations. And we will make the dust under that black or dark area. So this is one method and this is the other, but we must let dry. Obviously, all of this also will be covered with dust. So this is why I am creating more contrast or trying to exaggerate, because we'll be covered with dust. But now we must let dry. while we continue doing another thing. So later you will return to me your model and I will finish, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, too. Next step is the rust. We will use the other color, the rust, okay? For people where the camouflage contain more dark yellow, will be much better. For people using more green and brown, will be less visible. So, Timo, give me again your tank, please. The turret. Why you guys want to put the turret? It's not necessary. Eh? I thought that you cleaned all my work. No, it was upside down. So why? Okay. We have here. This is the previous example. And where to apply the rust and why? Don't apply in every places. Don't apply the rust streaks in all chips in your tank. Only in some of them. One more time, you must be random. So we can paint here some lines. With more or less intensity. And now with the fine brush and thinner, enamel thinner, we will blend one side first. First, one side only. You see that those four lines are too symmetric and similar and equal. Now we turn the model and we blend the other side. And we will see how we fix that, that symmetry. First we blend it. So what we can do if four lines are too similar? Well, we can remove one of them, or even to make it shorter. And we will need to paint a new one, for example here. Too much. Still too much. It's important that you see how I manipulate the kit, that I turn around for blending. So this is typical. When you are making rust, you must add more or remove it until you find the right balance. Let me make one very big, just to show you the point about how to blend it. Let me make one very big. This is in 1/6 scale. So first we blend half of the line, look the position of my brush, and now I turn around and I blend the other side. Okay, if I want to make it shorter, I just remove part of the color. So I will obtain a shorter one. Here you can see that I can increase the intensity. So this is the way how to work. Okay. Okay. For example, this we can make shorter. So in this way, we can be unbalanced, trying to add more intensity in one side than the other, or less in another areas, some areas without rust. But this is the way how to work, adding more, removing, adding more, removing. So it's not something static. In sun chipping, we can paint some lines. Doesn't matter if this happens, that is too big. We will blend it later. Over the brown will be something stupid to do it because it's difficult to see it. So this is why I told you that models with dark yellow will be better. I painted this, and now let's go to blend it. First one side, doesn't matter if it's too long. One side, and now the other side. If you want to make shorter any of the lines, now it's time to do it. Okay, and now we must let dry to avoid the shiny look, because when it is dry, it will be completely matte. Again, less is more. Don't overdo it. In some areas, I like to paint even more quantity. For example, in this rear area, And we will blend it again. Just to make a kind of accumulation around the ring. Some other areas. Okay, faster. Now, depending if you are making an abandoned tank or a very old vehicle, you will add more rust in the horizontal surfaces or less. But this is logic because the accumulation of the rain, of the water from the rain around some areas will create those effects of rust very easily. And someone will tell me, and why do you know that? You was in the Second World War to see if this happened? But no, but this happened in actual tanks. Don't forget that the modeling is a kind of interpretation too. And we can adapt effects that we see in actual vehicles, even in civil vehicles like an excavator, a truck. If we find an interesting effect in some modern vehicles, just adapt it to your Second World War tank. Because probably this happened in the same way. For example, just look the tracks of an excavator. The tracks probably have the same look than a Tiger I in the Second World War. So we can play with the rust around some places, some parts, and components. Remember that when it is dry, it will become more matte. Also, around some details, we can apply a kind of wash. For example, here. Or around some details. But if I do that here, don't do it in the other side. Remember. If you haven't too much time for painting in your home, this is a good advice. Just paint half of the tank and the other half of the tank in another different week. And even hiding with tape or something the other side, so you will make more effort to make that weathering in a very asymmetric way. So we have here some rust streaking effects, few lines. We can make also in the gun barrel, in some vertical areas, because this one have Zimmerit, will be difficult to make many vertical ones. Now, for example, here, another way to make contrast within different fenders, we can use also the rust. For example, here. We can make this fender very rusty. And now we will blend it. Okay, so another way to make contrast between the different panels. Easy, right? It's important that you make a practice of blending the streaking lines. When you have time in your home, just paint some lines and blend from one side and then from the other side. Just practice to control the distance and the intensity of each line of rust. Also remember that if you lose a lot of intensity, just let dry and repeat again over, and you will duplicate the intensity of the rust. So it's not only about to make different lines and different lengths of the lines, but also different intensities and distributed in a very random way and very asymmetric. I will show you here the example that all of you have in front of you. Okay. Just painting little lines and blending. And here is the sample in the roof, right? In combination with the chippings that I explained you in the beginning, with the Timo Tiger. Here is the chipping inside the dark yellow. Here is chipping just in dark yellow over the brown, and here chipping color over the dark yellow. So here you can see all examples, plus the rust over sun chipping, only over some of them. And here also in some rivets, in some nuts. So now let's go to one of my favorite steps, that is to play with oils. Unfortunately, the set only contains one oil, but this is my favorite oil. It's the one that I use most. This is why it is included in the kit, in the solution box. That is the dark brown. This is a very dark color that will allow us to make shadows and contrast in some components in our model. If you use this one in combination with another lighter ones, you can create a lot of effects, no? But in this box is only this one, that is more than enough. But I recommend you to have at least 4 or 5 different oil brushes to create different effects. For example, always is interesting the dust or how to say, buff color, because those are light colors and are very useful for the dark yellow to make some highlights sometimes. Also another colors, the starship field is another good color that are very useful to create variety. So minimum 4 or 5 colors could be more than enough to do everything. Also, I use a lot the blue color to create shadows. The blue color is create more deep when you are making the shadows, especially around turrets or in green vehicles, for example, and that helped me a lot. I have here all my oils, but I wanted to use only the tools included in the box. But if we have time, later we will show you some examples. Also, today I wanted to show you how to make camouflage in different ways, very fast with the acrylics, with hard edge and smooth camouflage. but everything made without mask. But let me see if we have enough time later. So this color, that is oil, I will put here a bit in the... You can use directly the brush, which is faster sometimes, because if, for example, you need to retouch something in your model, you take this, you touch it, and that's all. One more time, like I told you this morning, those techniques are made and developed to go fast painting your models. But here I put a bit of oil that I will use now with my brush, and you can start making some shadows in some areas. For example, in the opposite side of the hatch, here. In one side I made a chipping, but here I can make a shadow. First I paint. Well, I can even remove this, it will be faster. What? Sorry. Here. And now with the bigger brush, I will blend it. There are also two methods to blend the oil. This is one. This is the most difficult one, because you need a lot of control with your brush, but sometimes it's the only way. Where is the hatch? Here. Okay. I have created a little shadow around. Let's make something bigger. For example, because here I made rust and here also, here I can paint with this dark color. Also, I can paint here in this panel. I will blend it later. And here in this side, for example here, remember still applying the rule of the asymmetry, okay? Don't repeat in both sides. The internal ring of the turret is a good place, and between two fenders, like I made with the rust, also we can make with this dark color. In the frontal, that here was too dark, could be a good place. And now I will blend it, everything. I will try to explain you now the other way of blending that the people who make planes use very often. But I'm not sure if over this satin matte surface will work in the same way. But maybe because some of you have your model very satin, I can use one of your vehicles. Especially over the brown areas, you can use this color a lot because it's the only way to give contrast. Also, in the end, I will take each of your model here in the camera and we will discuss a little about each one, okay? That will be interesting. The other method of blending is, so I will paint like I made before. Still fresh. And now I will let dry a bit. And I will use a completely new brush. Not new about new, but that I doesn't use it before. I wait a little. I painted here in that area, okay? In my previous method, I used thinner, removing the excess of thinner for blending. I told you that is difficult sometimes, because if you use too much thinner, you will not blend the color. You will mix the color with the thinner and everything will be expanded in all directions. But with this method, it's more easy to control. Thank you. Because I am not using thinner, which is important. This brush is completely dry, and I will start blending the color, still very fresh, because the surface was a bit fresh. But I am not using any enamel thinner this time. One more time, you must let dry before blending, something that I doesn't made it. This method is more simple, apparently, and works very well if you let dry enough the oil and if the surface is not totally matte. The pigment, Everybody have the pigment to make the dust? Good. So take a brush.
Which one?
A big one. It's not necessarily one of the three that is included. Maybe you have another brushes with you. In fact, I will take a new one. I always use an old brush like this to apply the pigment. And it's important that the brush is not impregnated of odorless thinner. So, how we will place the pigment over our vehicle? Take with the brush the pigment and start applying always around the turret ring. That is one of the places where the accumulation is more evident. Also, you can accumulate here in the front big plate, the armor plate, and under the fan cover. Also, the rear areas collect a lot of dust. Also, under the fan cover, one more time. Around the fuel entry. And also in the front. For example, here. Okay. About the turret, a little less, but also many people never add dust or hair in the top of the turrets, and this is a big mistake because you can see in the actual tanks that the turrets have sometimes even more dust or hair than the chassis of the tank. So we can put here around the cupola, here a bit, another one here. Well. So we will obtain something like this. Okay, we don't need more pigment. Now take a different brush, for example this the 6 number, or if you have something even bigger, use a big brush for the thinner. And now the odorless thinner. Obviously, it's necessary to let dry the previous steps, because now we will mix all together and will be a mess, because the oils are still fresh. This is why we need to let dry the previous steps at least 24 hours. That is logic. But because we need to learn how to apply the pigment, let's go. I will humidify the surface by touching the pigment with a very damped brush loaded of thinner. Okay? And don't touch too much the pigments over the surface right now. Just let dry. Again in the turret. Remember, don't move your brush too much with the pigments. You just need to damp a bit the pigment and let dry a bit of time. Your model now will look something like that. Very ugly again. So let's continue with the dust. Remember that we apply the pigments and we just dump it with thinner, and now it is drying. Okay, mine is still fresh, and I wanted to show you accelerating the process with the high dryer. What happened? How everything changed of color. You see how fast change the aspect and the look of the pigment, no? When they dry. Here. And obviously the look is not perfect, not nice. Oh, still missing parts from here. Okay. So what we can do when the pigment become dry and some areas are not like we wanted, no? Very irregular and ugly. So we will use a sponge. Doesn't matter if it is this one or the other that you have, the flat one. You can use it to start removing some areas, especially the areas more exposed to the manipulating of the cream. For example, this. We can start rubbing the sponge over the surface and removing the excess of pigment in some areas. With this, with a bit is more than enough. Don't start removing and removing a lot. Sorry. Here. Obviously, I am removing more from the top areas of the details. Even you can use your finger, because you can control the pressure much more and remove the dust in some areas that you don't want. For example, let's go here. the Zimmerit will be impossible to remove it. It's impossible to remove it here. So what we can do is to take thinner again and try to blend it a bit more. It's normal and natural that the dust entry in the holes of the Zimmerit, and this is more realistic than to make dry brush or another effects. Now we will, while it is drying, I will continue with the turret. Now you understand why I told you try to exaggerate, because with the dust many effects will disappear. Obviously also because we doesn't let enough time for drying the previous steps, it is getting worse, no? But if you let dry enough time the previous steps and then apply the pigments and you remove it with a sponge, you will obtain a nice look. Don't forget to use the finger if you want more clean areas, but the dust will concentrate around the hatches and the details, because the Zimmerit is very important. Now you can see with this second round of thinner that the pigments are working much better with the Zimmerit. But again, we need a bit more work. Maybe here we can take a bit. And again, drying. We see now that the accumulation of the dust in the cement is more natural. We cannot remove with the finger, obviously, because this is inside the tiles. But this is part of the process of the weathering. Here around the hatch we can clean a bit. Also, we appreciate that the accumulation of the dust is in the well seams. That is also normal, like in a royal tank. So this is why, Daniel, you was asking me about to paint the details in the well seams. Before you start spending too much time with the well seams painting one by one, you must think, okay, which parts will be covered by dust and which other will be free of dust. And those are the ones that you must paint. Or in another hand, you will lose a lot of time painting those, okay? So, working with the sponge, working with the brush, more thinner, removing, drying, adding more. This is the way to work with the pigments until we achieve the look that we are looking for. With the pigment, we can pour a bit of pigment, we can put a bit of pigment in the palette. And we can take with our big brush here. We take thinner, we mix it a bit more, and with that mixture I can apply a bit in the lower areas of the Zimmerit in my side. Not you, Daniel.
Yeah.
So I will paint here only in the lower area. Now I will dry. because obviously the washes, the dirt doesn't accumulate in those places, but the dust accumulate easily. Remember what I told you to do when the pigment is dry, and if you don't like the look, we take again thinner with my brush and I will try to blend it to make it softer and smooth. And again, I will dry it. And you see here some clean areas, free of dust, that must be corrected. Unfortunately, now this fender is unglued. Following the instruction of the book, we will see exactly the same that we saw before. Apply the pigment, humidify with white spirit or odorless thinner, and this will be the ugly look. With a sponge or with brush, we can remove the excess and we will obtain a dusty appearance in our model. What is next? Using splashes and enamel odorless thinner, we can make a kind of a streaking effects. Will be a bit difficult in a tank with Zimmerit. It's not the same, but fortunately we had Daniel kit without the fenders, so maybe we can make some effects over there. I will do also in my fenders. So where is my product? Right here. This is another of my favorite colors. The dry step is one of my favorite, together with the dark brown oil or the chipping color. Is some of those are my favorite colors. Again, don't forget to retouch the pigments as much as you want. So work areas by area slowly. Even now, I think that I already can remove the tape in my kit. Look what happened, because I put tape right here and it became humidified with the thinner and the washes. The paint was a bit softer and I remove it now with my tape. This is because the washes entry under the tape, very close to the tape. But this doesn't happen if the surface is completely dry and you are painting with airbrush, so don't worry. What about this special product? This is not like a normal paint, it's not like an enamel paint, even if it is enamel. But this contains also little particles that provide you a realistic texture of accumulated hair. The splashes is more thin, and the matte, that is the other product, is much more thick, and we can use that also for the running gear, for the hull and for many other parts of the tank. But with this is good enough to make splashes, to make some accumulation of hair and many other things. We can use also a kind of streaking effects. I will show you. I will show you. That will be faster than explain you. Is this a step we will see here, making those small lines and then blending, creating those effects. Okay, with Zimmerit is more complicated. With flat surfaces will be much more easy. one important thing that you must understand about this product is that don't spend too much time shaking it, because it's very dense and have a very high density, so all materials go to down inside the bottle. So my recommendation is to take with your brush amount of this product like this from the bottom, okay, something like this, and put in your palette. And that's all. With this is more than enough. And now we will clean. The first thing we can do is the rime marks on the fenders. Let's make some lines, vertical lines, and like we made before, take the flat brush and blend it. Always with the same method, humidify with thinner, remove the excess, and start blending from up to down. Until you blend completely the lines, but to allow to see the lines a bit. In the rear area, you can accumulate more in the Zimmerit, over the Zimmerit, sorry. And don't be scared if you are hiding the camouflage. Almost here the camouflage are disappearing, almost disappear. But I don't take care, because I try to make something realistic. And sometimes the mud and dust will hide the camouflage. Even sometimes we think that a tank is painted only in dark yellow, and probably is just covered of dust. Okay, and we can do the same for the rear fender and the exhaust pipes cover. You can do the exhaust pipes. And I think that we doesn't use the airbrush in all process, eh? Oops, out of camera. Each product of splashes has different texture. I mean, there are ones that are totally matte, another are a bit satin, and another one are completely glossy. This is because it represents the matte in different situations, fresh or dry. Keep in mind that when it is dry, it will be impossible to remove it. Eh? So everything that you make with this product must be definitely. as well as the frontal area of your model. Even you can apply a lot of quantity in the front, covering almost everything, almost painting everything. Like I am right now doing in my model. So the camouflage almost is behind the accumulation of matte. So okay, here is drying very fast the splashes. Like I told you before, I have not fear to cover the camouflage. Like you can see here, that the camouflage is getting more and more soft, and this happens also in the horizontal area, so I can work also with the splashes in some horizontal areas if we want, okay? But the rear areas is the most important, and the size. Like you can see here the exhaust pipe cover. Those small that small texture that you can see, can you see it in the screen? It's because it's splashes, and this contains that texture that make it more so realistic. During 1 hour or even 2 hours, you can still retouching the splashes, but after it is dry, it will be dry forever. Just the opposite to the pigments with odorless thinner. That the pigments, if right now I want to modify, I can remove it or do whatever I want. But not with the splashes. Well, remember that we had two options for the dirt. One, like you can see here in the lower area, and in the other side in the upper area. So the pigment will work in a similar way, the pigment and the splashes. In that case, we will apply the pigment wash only in that area, but when we will make the splashes, we will apply the splashes in all surface. But you see the difference, okay? This is because suppose that the fenders, the original fenders in this side protect the upper areas from the dust, and this is why this looks more new than the lower area. And in this side, suppose that the dust are coming from the top, and when they remove the fenders, this area appears more clean. So it's two interpretations with the same vehicle, and this is up to you to choose one or the other. Of course, now we must make also the splashes. And also copying from original photos, because everything that I usually do is always based in real photos, and each effect, like for example those here, because the foil is also taken from photos, no? So it have a logic. Also the chipping made with a sponge over the driver hatch. This is the same process that we were making before. Maybe it's a bit overexposed. Here is the same process using the pigments, humidify with thinner and letting dry and removing with the sponge. So it's exactly the same process that's in your King Tiger, in your Tiger one, sorry. But what I wanted to show you, well, we will see this today also with the Tiger. But all of those effects that appear very black, everything is taken from photos and with logic. And until I don't understand why this happened in a tank, I don't do it. Because I need to understand why this happened. For example, in the end, this is another good example here. This is the real photo with those strain effects that is just fuel from the cans, and I try to copy in my model, so easy. And also the chipping in red primer, with a red primer. So this is why I recommend you to see real photos of tanks and try to adapt here. And even you can copy the same effects from a modern tanks like this or this in a Tiger 1 or a Panzer 4 or any other. But everything must explain something in your model. Any chipping, any effect, any damage must say something. For example, if you remove here the hammer, just place it in the rear part of the tank together with some tools or other materials, no? Just to explain that maybe the tankers needed the hammer to fix something in the engine and they forgot to put the hammer in the place. You must try to follow that, that process. Or maybe not all tone cables must be in the right place. Maybe one of those is out of position because they forgot it or because they were in a hurry. Or sometimes I have seen the road bars, those bars here that are made in wood or sometimes in metal, those bars, I have seen sometimes one of them connected to the other one. So this is a beautiful and nice touch and detail that the judges can see in the contest. Oh my God, he took one of those and connect to this one because the crew in a hurry forget to dismount, or because maybe the connection was rusty and they were not able to disconnect one or the other, no? Those details are super important when you are making your models, okay? You must take the flat brush. You must take the splashes already in your palette, like I recommend you since the beginning. Something like that. And you will need a bit of thinner to dilute and to make more smooth and soft. Because originally it's too thick. You can make the splashes in two ways, with a toothpick or with the airbrush. I always prefer the airbrush because have more control and more pressure. But I will start here with the toothpick because not all of you have airbrush. My brush contains a lot of matte effect, splashes effect, sorry. And I will put the brush in the position of the direction of the splashes. So in that way. And I will start making splashes.
Also dadurch könnt ihr das wesentlich besser kontrollieren, als wenn ihr das mit der Airbrush macht. Wirklich. Dann empfehle ich euch immer, das so zu machen, weil ja, Airbrush und dann. Habe ich gehört.
Okay, this is the beginning. Don't try to make the splashes at once. I mean, don't try to make right now, boom, now it's done. No, 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 no. Do one thin layer, let dry, control it, remove it, some dots that you doesn't like it, and repeat the process again. And again if it's necessary. So now I apply the first layer. I will study each dot if I like it or not. And if I doesn't like something, I can remove it with thinner and my brush. For example, I splashed by mistake the sauce covers, so I will clean it. Also here, maybe there are some dots that I doesn't like it too much, so I will make softer. Even I can blend it with vertical movements, because I will make more coats. More coats will mean more texture at the end. For example, like this. Can you see the texture? A lot, eh? So you can do that also in your model. But using different coats, different layers. And now I change the position of my model because the splashes are coming from different direction, right? So let's go. And here I will try to make a lot of accumulation. Okay. Very slowly we will accumulate more and more and more until achieve the texture that I showed you before. You see the contrast now? But you need to apply more coats of matte, and while it is drying, obviously we need more and more and more. Let me explain you one more thing made with, because this is interesting, with fresh engine and winter soil. Okay, very fast, and this is simple and always is a nice touch for all your models at the end and give a lot of personality, but if you overdo, could be ugly. So apply this pigment over the engine areas or hatches, for example, around the exhaust pipe, for example here, or even around the ring of the turret. Not in every place, so if you make it here in the rear, don't do it in the front. And now, with the fresh engine oil, that this is again one of my super favorite products that I use always in every places, and I like to make those effects. Remember what I showed you before in my Tiran tank with the oil effects? Is what we will do now. First, I will dilute. Okay, this is my product. I will put a big drop of it in my palette. And now with odorless thinner again, I will start damping the surface of the pigment. Just letting to expand by capillarity, but very diluted at the beginning. very diluted. Not in all areas, in fact. Now only with thinner. I am working now with thinner only. While it is drying a bit, let me show you again the effect that I made in almost in all my tanks. Remember that is this. Okay. So let's accelerate the process of drying. The first coat, like you can see, will look matte. Okay. Even if this product is very glossy, looks very matte now. But this is because I diluted with thinner and also it is mixed with the pigments. I am adding more quantity. And now I can make the splashes. So with the brush, okay, this, I will take the product. And now I will start splashing in those areas. More diluted, smaller drops. But I am in a hurry now and I don't take care too much of the size of the drops. Just I want to show you the method, okay? If you do that very well, you will give to your model a very realistic sensation of machine working with the engine. And I cannot control now the drops. But when you control it very well and slowly, for me this is the most pleasing moment when I make a tank or a vehicle. To play with those products at the end is the best. Now with the brush, we can even add more quantity in some areas. When I do that in my models, I take long to do that. Because I try to be accurate around the details, always fixing the shapes of the drops. And trust me that you can see this very often in vehicles in running conditions. Just imagine that this tank arrived to the depot just to repair. They remove the turret, they start disassembling the many components of the turret or the engine, and maybe this tank spent few weeks under repairment. So this can happen more often than we think. So well, this is just an example, okay? Obviously you must do it with more love, no? or more time. Passion, yeah, but because I cannot go faster. About the splashes, you just need to continue making the splashes in the fenders, in the rear, in the front, trying to accumulating, This is more or less all process that you can find in that solution box made in few hours. No? Obviously, if you make in your home now with time, with no hurry, with a better lights and everything, you should achieve very nice effects. Can you give me 5 minutes for each one to see their models on camera? Because I think that could be interesting for them. I know that you was not able to finish until the end, I know it. But please, give me one by one your model. Don't wake up, just give your model to the guy next to you and give to me, so I can take a few words for each one, okay? This is a final look. This model will stay here in Modellbau König, so if someone wants to see again, just to remember how was made the techniques, and especially to see the contrast between one side and the other, with weathering and without weathering. Those techniques are simple, basic, and enough to start doing something realistic. But you can be more complicated, adding more techniques, or even using the same technique in a different way. Here, obviously, we have the problem of the pigments that was drying and you was not able to remove it enough. Now it's time to remove it. Fortunately, you can do in your home. You can take the sponge and start retouching and blending again, adding more dust, or doing many other effects. Obviously, also you need to add the pigments over the Zimmerit in some areas, but you make a nice effect of dust on the fenders, which is good. About the chipping, be careful with the sponge, or you will find problems like this one that maybe is too much. So the chipping with the sponge is easy, but you must try to control more. Try to remove more quantity of paint in the tissue paper. Okay, and the same here. You must continue working the covers with the sponge to clean it a bit more, and coming back again and finally made the splashes with this product. Remember, that will be your next step. In general, the washes and the filters look good, but the problem is now with the pigments, okay? That you must continue working, but you see that is easy because you can remove it, okay? Next one, guys. Next one, very quick. Here, the first thing that I see very quick is that when you added the pigments, you added not too much quantity. I can see here. And you just drop the thinner and you doesn't touch it. You can touch a little, Daniel. You can touch a little more and expand just to cover the surface, because we need to cover the camouflage with dust. Here we have the example from Daniel Chu, where he already made the pigment with less fear, trying to cover in the horizontal surfaces very well. So it's a good comparison. Here again, your pigment appear still fresh, and it must be expanded with the brush. Let me take mine, and you must take it and expand it with no fear. Okay. Just a little, not too much. But the problem is that you just let drop the thinner, and that's all. No, expand it around the details. And some areas can be cleaned like this. That's all. But you was a bit conservative, a bit shy with the pigment. You was scared, my camouflage is perfect, I don't want to damage, oh my god, I spent 3 weeks to make the camouflage. I am right? But in another hand, you made the pigments in the front more realistic. That is attractive. You was less scared covering the pigments, but even you can do a little more, because that plate in the front collect a lot of dust. Okay, obviously your camouflage was fantastic, very nice. The chipping may be a bit homogeneous, are well done, but maybe a bit homogeneous, almost the same quantity and same intensity in all size of the fenders. You must work more with the chipping, and less fair with the pigments. Here is well done. Maybe it looks like a L, but it's good enough. Well, what do you think, guys? Do you enjoy this workshop? Have you learned something? Yes. Well, I know that it's very stressful to paint something in short time. So try to imagine my position, that I need to do everything here very quick. But I think that the experience need to be useful for you guys, just to remember the small things that I was explaining you, that is more important than to finish the kit. Just to keep in mind that the symmetry, to make random things, to let dry the things, to work with different layers. Do you remember that I told you always working with layers? So this is the best way to avoid to make mistakes. When we are making something very small, layer by layer, we will construct a beautiful aspect in our models. And you can apply all of these that you have seen today in any kind of vehicle. Doesn't matter if it's modern ones, Americans, Russian, or Second World War. And that's all from my side. I was super happy to stay here with you guys. I enjoy like a children. Because for me that was a wonderful experience. Thank you to Christian, because he organized everything together with your team, and you make a wonderful work, taking care of us with food, retransmitting all of this by internet, and doing all of this for your customers, that they really deserve it. So thank you from my heart. I am so happy to stay here in Germany, and I hope to see you again in another model contest in the future, but in front of your finished models, okay? So thank you for your patience today. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Discover many more videos on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate notifications. Thank you for watching.